Once again, thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance, and we'll be speaking of the Equal Rights Amendment being on the ballot in New York this November, along with some other issues. Of course, I'm Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Oh man, it's just waiting for this rain to be over. I know you mentioned it there too, but it's been raining crazy here for like the past week. But the
Oh,
humidity in Japan in the summer is crazy, so it's kind of to be expected. Plus, it's the rainy season, so yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really hot here, and it just started to rain a few minutes ago, and it seemed like a sudden downpour. And I think it might have stopped already. It was like a 5 minute thing, but I guess that's what happens when it gets so hot. Sometimes it's got to cool off just a bit.
Yeah, well, the humidity gets so high, the percentage gets so high, it's got to release that stuff, so the water, and that's what happens here. But in the rainy season, it happens quite often. So if you ever come to Japan, probably not best time to come in the middle of the summer. It's wait until August, September, October-ish.
Problem is, that's also not the best time to go to Florida or the Caribbean or anywhere in a tropical climate. And so, uh,
Right.
you know, you can't go to Japan, you can't go to anywhere. It's like, where are you going to go? I guess these guys
Right.
in New York for the summer. All right. Well, we're also joined by Sheba Abraham from the League of Women Voters, and I'm glad you're on this week, Sheba, because we'll be speaking of that Equal Rights Amendment. What's going on with you?
oh, trying to keep cool. It's been extremely hot up here, and I'll tell you, thank God for air conditioners.
Yeah, yeah. I saw somebody in Miami post something about there being power shortages, right? They were advising people to keep their AC off when possible, or when they're sleeping, make it a few degrees warmer. If they're out, put it up to like 80
Mhm.
degrees or turn it off. And she was like, listen, I'll cause a power outage on the whole eastern seaboard before I put my air conditioner on 80 degrees in Miami.
Yeah,
Tough.
Miami gets hot, but like
Yeah.
it's not like Tallahassee hot. Like it doesn't have the humidity like Tallahassee did. Like they're just being soft.
Well, it is hot. It does get hot there, but I think being closer
Yeah,
to
it
the
does.
ocean, it's tempered a little bit. And
Yeah.
it is what you're used to, what you're accustomed to, right? I
Yeah.
got friends in
Right.
Miami who say, it's so warm here compared to New York. They were afraid to come to New York in the winter because they were telling me if it drops down to 60 degrees in Miami, we're all wearing coats, long pants and everything. So they were like,
Mhm.
man, what are we going to do in 30-degree weather in New York? We're not going to be able to survive that. But they came to New York and their bodies adjusted to it, believe it or not, right? They were here for a few days.
Mhm.
And when it hit 32 degrees, they said, you know what? This isn't as bad as we thought. This actually kind of feels like
Mhm.
Miami's 60 degrees, right? It's all relative.
Oh,
Nah, 30 degrees is ridiculous. Nah,
It
humans should
wasn't. It
not be
was
there.
not as bad as they were expecting it to be. They thought, man, this is half the temperature that we can stomach. How could we're gonna like freeze to death on site? That didn't happen, right? You kind of adjust.
30 degrees is ridiculous. Now people
no,
I
it's not
like
too bad.
what? Are you crazy? 30 degrees is insane.
No, I say like maybe 10, 15 degrees. Yeah,
Man
that's
is
insane.
ignorant.
30 is the 30 is tolerable.
Listen,
Nah, water can't even tolerate that. What are you talking about?
I prefer 80s. Even 90s sometimes once in a while feels nice because it feels like you're on vacation, but you don't want to be swimming in 90-degree weather either. In the 80s it's nice. Even high
Yeah,
70s is pleasant at times.
yeah. Well, and in times, sometimes you need that rain to bring that temperature down a little bit because in New York does get hot. Like that's, it's not a joke. New York summers can get, kind of punishing in certain
Mhm.
times. It's not throughout the whole summer, but there can be some serious days.
Right.
But
And
rain is, huh?
I saw a meme that was going around recently where they said this is the hottest summer on record, and then someone said, "Well, it will be the coldest, like it's the hottest summer of my life." Other person says it'll be the coldest summer of the rest of your life, which is scary.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
because this type of weather is becoming normalized. Like it seems like every year for like the past 10, 15 years, it's like we break a new heat record every year. And yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well,
Oh,
speaking
Well,
of
at
kind of
least
crazy,
I
speaking
was
of,
gonna say, at least it's not, if it's raining, at least it's not raining meteors.
oh
Because
yeah,
if
so tell me about that. I didn't even hear about
yeah,
that.
that's true.
I don't know, like you tell me, like what was it, like a big noise or something? It seems there was a report that there was a meteor that passed over New York City, the state Statue of Liberty and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
Did you hear some loud boom? Apparently there were reports of this.
I heard nothing,
Yeah.
but I heard people in other places saying that they heard it. And then I saw reports that it was military testing of some kind in New Jersey. So I'm surprised to hear that this is a meteor.
Well, apparently there was military activity in the area at the same time.
Hmm.
Um,
Were they trying to shoot
some
down the
people
meteor?
some people said they also saw a fireball in the sky.
All
Um,
right.
so this was, I guess, between 10 and noon. But that's kind of crazy. Like it was that low? Like how big was that meteor that it was
Right.
that, you know what I mean?
And also, can't we spot these
Well, it
coming?
says that,
Why is it a surprise today? Hey, surprise, a meteor almost killed you. Wouldn't that have been seen?
Okay. Oh, so it looks like NASA said that the meteor passed over the Statue of Liberty before disintegrating 29 miles above Midtown Manhattan.
Wow.
uh-huh. It said it was likely. They're not sure. It was likely. Said meteor likely passed over. So if
And
they
it was
say likely,
moving
does
at
that mean it could have been something else?
maybe it was something else, and that's the other sound. The military was shooting down whatever that other thing was.
That's a
Invasion.
possibility.
We're due for an invasion. Well, all the stuff that's been going on, I think we're due for an alien invasion. Like, what else? You
Right.
know, what
Right.
else could happen?
But it relates back to that conversation about it being all relative, right? The 60 degrees on Miami seems crazy to them. 32 in New York was tolerable because they were used to it. It's almost like at this point, we're used to such crazy that that would be the next logical step. Maybe it wouldn't even feel like such a departure from the norm.
Yeah, you know what? I think people would be ready
Mhm.
for it. Some people would be. Um, yeah, bring it on. I say, you know what? I say bring it on. Bring the aliens
That
on.
is that what it would take to bring people together because we have so much division right now. If we were contending with an outside force,
Uh-huh.
like an alien invasion, would we on Earth, maybe hopefully even within the US, be able to get together and unite, put our differences behind us to take on this foreign force?
Um, yeah, I think there'd be, I'd hope there would be. I'd hope there would be. But you know what? Let's just say bring it on. Let's do it. Let's get it. I
Yeah.
want to see an alien ship land like right in the center of Times Square or something like that. Or nah, that's not big enough. It's got to be massive, like crazy massive. Like fill up all of Central Park, like big mothership type. Just let's just get it over
Oh
with.
yeah.
Uh, Nothing is shocking to the system anymore, I guess.
No, I don't think it really would be. It'd be,
Uh-huh.
I think what would be crazy about it would not just that, aliens landed, but social media talk and media talk would just be ridiculous. The speculation, the memes, all of that stuff would just be the
Also,
conspiracy.
right, I was going to say that. And so, would the conspiracy theories be that these are not aliens, that this is not foreign, that this is CGI, or that this is AI, or that these are actually Americans, right? Usually the
Yeah.
conspiracy theories are that something normal, something mundane is out of this world, extraordinary, right? But if you actually got something extraordinary, would the conspiracy theories be it's actually just regular stuff and you guys are blowing this up?
Yeah, I think so. This would definitely have something like that. So there'd be a contingent of people saying, "Oh yeah, this is all set up. This is these are all
Mhm.
actors. This is, it doesn't matter if they see it on TV, one of the
Oh, yeah.
aliens could show up on like Jimmy Kimmel and they'd be like, nah, this is all
Right.
fake."
No, it doesn't matter if they were actually abducted themselves, they'd be saying that, right? Didn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 It's a
Mhm.
figment of my own imagination. So
Yeah. I think there'd have to be a sustained invasion for people to start believing it, I think. But then there would still be a few people who'd be like, no, this was their plan all along, just to take over everything.
right.
But
Well, I wanted to mention, I guess while we're still on Earth, we haven't yet been invaded, there is a new location establishment that opened up in Rockaway called Pilot House. And I went there a couple of nights ago. I encourage you all to check it out. I know Jay Lixoff, who sometimes joins us here, took my phone and called you, as she sometimes does. So you got to see a glimpse of the establishment. And it was nice to go there with some friends from the area. I will say, hopefully, they do get their act together a little bit better. I think they will. They'll tighten up as they go along. It's a beautiful place, but the service did take a long time. And they warned us that, to be fair, when we came in, they said, listen, it's going to take a very long time to get your food, basically. And it did, right? But we ordered burgers, and I think it took like 45 minutes to an hour for the burgers to come out. And so I don't know if it's a matter of them needing more help, or just streamlining the process, getting it together, whatever it is. But I hope that they do that. They've got a beautiful rooftop where you can go. There's a bar up there as well. They were not serving mixed drinks on the rooftop, only downstairs. They said only cans and I think appetizers. You couldn't get the full menu either when you were up there. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. It may have to do with safety concerns. Maybe they didn't want people stepping on glass. I'm not sure. But they're keeping it very simple up there. Again, great view. You know what I mean? It's been the weather to want to experience something like that. Get out there, maybe sit on a nice rooftop, enjoy the view, and have a cold drink. It's beautiful. It's Rockaway. It's right by the beach. How could you go wrong with that atmosphere? So I wish them all the best of luck going forward, and they're a welcome addition to the community.
was it a particularly busy night? Maybe they were just overrun that night.
It was relatively crowded, but
Hmm.
it wasn't that bad, right? It wasn't like you had like 100 people up in there. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't have taken that long to bring some burgers out.
True, true, true.
Even like little things. And again, it's probably growing pains. It's a new place, and so
Right, yeah, it takes some
hearing,
time to get into the groove.
yeah, like they didn't bring out the utensils right away. So even when they started bringing out some food, then people had to ask for utensils, and um, people were criticizing like little things like that. Like you would think that they would just know to do, and they didn't do. They had to be prompted.
Well, let me ask you, was there mustard on your burger?
No, this is New York. Who puts mustard on a burger? Actually,
I heard somebody else. They went to the bar, the place that you're describing in the Rockaways.
mhm,
Someone else went somewhere. I think it was the Florida Keys, and they
okay,
went to an establishment like exactly like you're describing. And
and
they were saying that, yeah,
took
and
too
they
long and
said it
everything.
was. I'm sorry.
They said that it took too long to get the food.
Um, no, but they did say like how you're saying how the food they had the food was on one level, but
Oh,
upstairs, right? But they didn't mention about it because I think when they went, it was like an off night, so they
right.
had no problem getting food.
Okay.
But yeah, they would describe that just like you're describing now.
Right. I will say,
Yeah,
Jay, it's funny you
that
asked me if it was mustard.
establishment.
The burger that I got, I believe, which was the Pilot House burger, I believe it has a spicy mustard on it, though. It's not a regular.
That's mustard.
No,
Still
but right,
mustard.
that's like a specialty kind of burger. It's not a standard burger. You know what I mean? Like
Just saying. Still mustard.
that was on the menu of this is a burger with a spicy sauce on it kind of thing, but it's not standard. You don't get regular mustard on a hamburger here. You would be looked at crazy, I think, if you asked for some regular mustard on your hamburger.
Still mustard. Just saying.
Yeah, but that's a specialty. That's like like putting hot sauce. So you know what I mean? Like sometimes you get like a menu and they have their versions of fancy kind of burgers or fancy kind of takes on standard items, right? And like here's
So you're saying mustard on a burger is fancy?
not regular mustard. This is hot. This is like a hot sauce, like a hot. What do you call that? Not Dijon. You know what I'm talking about? I think like, oh no, you know what? It wasn't mustard. It was a chipotle mayo. That's what it was. Chipotle.
Oh, you're changing the story now.
It wasn't mustard. It was.
I think
Yeah.
I found my new Saturday night entertainment. I'm going to call burger joints in New York and order a burger and be like, "Hey, is there mustard on that?" And then wait for their reaction.
We talked about this a while ago here, right? Didn't Sheba go and try to find
It
some
was McDonald's, right?
McDonald's? Was it McDonald's or Burger King?
Burger King.
Burger King. Yeah.
Try to figure
Yeah.
out where the mustard was, right? Because in New York, they don't do it. I don't think they do it in New Jersey either, right? But didn't you say, Sheba, there are some areas kind of close where they start putting the mustard on?
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So it's a regional thing.
Yeah. That's funny.
All right. Well, speaking of regional things, why don't we go over the poll from last week? Because we talked about New York's new policy regarding sealed garbage bins that you would have to buy from the city, right?
Oh, check it out. Switching it up today. We're going to start with the poll. All right. Well, the poll from last week, yeah, you mentioned about the garbage bins. The question that we posed was, do you believe New York City landlords should be required to buy and use sealable garbage bins from the city to address the rat problem? And so we had a number of voters on this point here, and it was 76% said yes, 24% said no, that they shouldn't have to do that.
Oh.
Wow. So 3/4 are saying that people should be required to buy the special cans from the city.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I think some of the comments here kind of back up that idea. One of the things, one person says, people would cheap out if they can buy a non-rat proof bin because of capitalism. I'm with the city on this. And that's a good point. Like if it's, say what?
Because of capitalism.
Yeah, that was a little weird, but I think just in general, if people could get a cheaper option, they probably would.
Yeah.
But if the point is to be get something effective, and supposedly I looked a little into supposedly the bins that the city has are supposed to be cheaper than retail versions of the same quality.
See, I was surprised by that. I guess I haven't bought a garbage bin in a while. $50 sounded expensive to me for a cheap little plastic garbage bin, right?
Well, I think it's a little bit more than a cheap little plastic garbage bin, because it's supposed to be guaranteed rat proof, right? And
yeah, but it's not like it's made out of reinforced steel or anything, right? It's still, I'm sure, a basic garbage bin.
It's I didn't remember what it was what it was made out of, but these are yeah, kind of I guess guaranteed to keep out to keep out the rats, and this follows a trend or at least an action that was taken in Europe some years back where they were use these to keep out rats from their trash.
I guess we have to look into how special these bins are and how different they are from the bins that most people have, right? Because we posited this idea of posting a list of qualifications, list of requirements for your bin to meet. And if they didn't meet those requirements, then you had to get one that did, whether from the city or elsewhere. But, if there's a certain material that they use that they've deemed to be the best material to stop rats from invading, then your bin should be that material. I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to say, here are the 3 or 4 things you have to meet, right? Criteria to meet to qualify. Right. What if you already have a bin? What if you have a bin that's even better? You went and you splurged on a super duper bin, right?
Yeah.
It was like $200, whatever it was. And it's much better. It keeps out rats and mice and all kinds of vermin, right? But the city is saying, well, your grade bin is no good. You got to buy a downgrade for $50. So I feel like if people already have the equipment that suffices, they should be allowed to use it.
Right. And one thing we didn't cover,
Mhm.
apparently there are going to be fines if people,
No, we did. We talked
Yeah.
about the 50
did we
bucks for
mention it?
defense and it goes up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, 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 right.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, another comment here was that they said, I buy the notion that a spec trash container will make trash collection more efficient. I don't know how many of these bins are in question, but I'm guessing many millions. So the city was probably getting very competitive pricing on so many of these trash
Right.
cans.
Right.
And that
Mine would be a
goes
little bit
to
cheaper, apparently,
right,
than buying it
Mhm.
privately. But again,
right.
which
So
is
the
better? But if you have the same one that you bought for more money, should you be required to buy another one?
It doesn't have the stamp on it. It doesn't have the
No.
NYC city stamp on it.
Yeah, and that's why the
Yeah,
city
that's true.
is it's a cash grab, especially
Okay.
when you start finding people.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's, it seems like I don't know. It does seem like it could be a revenue generator for the city, but it also could be a way to make sure that the quality of the trash bins are there so that this plan does get a chance to work to reduce the
I
rest.
guess to play devil's advocate here, if you were to have a list of qualifications and say you must meet X, Y, and Z criteria, it might be a little harder or take longer to enforce if someone didn't quite meet that,
Yeah,
right? And so
right.
it's easy to
Mhm.
say, hey, mine meets that, but then what if it doesn't? What if it's a little bit off? What if the lid is a little bit bootleg, right? What if the material is supposed to be
Right.
0.55% this, but it's really
Mhm.
0.54%, whatever it is. It might be a little
Mhm.
harder to prove and to establish that people are not up to
Right.
standard, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, looks like people are on board with it. Um, so,
I don't know.
um,
We have to, we got to look at, this will be illuminating. Is the
uh-oh.
city profiting off of these, right? Because that would be the difference. Are they selling them to us at cost, or is there a markup?
Well, I didn't see anything specifically on that. However, in one of the articles I did see, they were saying the trash bins from the city come in two sizes. There's a 35-gallon one which costs 45.88, and there's a 45-gallon one which costs 53.01. However, a general retail 21-gallon bin costs 43.47, and the one that the city is sending includes shipping and handling, so it's significantly lower price than similar bins at retail stores. So
Right, but they are also buying it wholesale.
sure, sure.
So
So I
what are
mean, they
they
might
paying
be
for
making
it?
a little
Mhm.
bit. I would expect, at the very least, I would expect the city to make enough to cover the personnel and the logistics that is going to manage this program.
You mean
At the
sanitation?
very least.
They already have a sanitation department.
Yeah, but someone's got to
Right.
do this. I would imagine they've
Don't we pay
got,
taxes for that?
I don't know, but I imagine they're going to put somebody in charge of this or something like,
You mean, I mean, they do have sanitation police as well. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
they
but this is
do.
a new, yeah,
right.
but who's going to be
Right.
taking the orders, processing all of that stuff, making sure, someone's got
Right.
to handle that. So at the very least, whatever it
Mhm.
costs to run this program, I would expect them to mark up to at least get that back, hopefully, so it doesn't just come out of the budget, make the program pay for itself, so to speak. As far as the city getting rich off of it, I don't know what their markup is.
Right. Well, also, if it succeeds at reducing the rat problem to a significant degree, that should save the city money on extermination costs and all those things, right?
Yeah, we'd hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. It's funny. I looked at the picture of it. The bin is the same type of bin that my mother has. And I
Right.
think I think in the place
Yeah.
where she lives, the HOA required everyone to have these specific bins. So everyone had to buy them just
But they're
like
not
this.
magic bins, are they? I mean, it's basically just a standard garbage bin with a good seal.
Well, it's a very thick plastic. It's got wheels attached to it and a latching lid. The lid can be latched,
I
not
think all
just
the
Mhm.
bins around here have
Mhm.
that. They all have that.
Yeah, so I don't know.
But I
That's
guess some have removable as well lids.
yeah, but
Oh, they all latch on to the bin.
hey, but they don't have the seal on it, you know?
What
It
kind of?
doesn't show the unity. The city seal
Oh,
is stamped on the side. Said, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, we're all together in our trash wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's funny that guy was like, because of
And
capitalism. I can see people inside complaining about socialized trash.
I think
Yeah.
another thing is that these are designed to work with the city's sanitation vehicles, so it makes the collection a little bit easier.
That's the thing I was actually, it's funny. I just mentioned the pilot house excursion, and we had a group of people. One of the people at the table is actually a sanitation worker from Howard Beach. And I started talking to him a little bit. I didn't really get into this topic. I was going to ask, what about these bins, if anything, help with the garbage collection process? Do they attach to the truck easier? You know what I mean? Are they shaped a certain way that they
Yeah.
can be more faster to the truck? Is it easier to pick up? I mean, is there something about it that's going to make their job easier?
Right. Yeah. So according to the article that I saw, that does work a little bit. It's designed to work with the sanitation vehicles that New York City uses. So
All right. Well, I guess we'll see how this all works out. Again, you'll
yeah.
have until June of 2026 as of now to purchase these from the city.
Right.
However, starting in November of this year, you will have to have your garbage in sealed bins, right? So they don't have to be purchased from the
Mhm.
city as of yet, but you won't be able to have just bags out loose.
Yeah. So all right.
Yeah, yeah, we'll keep an eye on.
That's crazy because
Mhm.
June of 2026 is when we saw like the deadline, right? But in this article, it also said that warnings will be issued to buildings not using the bins after November 12th through the end of the year, and fines will follow as of January 2nd, 2025.
They may start finding people who are not using sealable bins at all.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also going to be part of what we have to keep an eye on, right? Because
Right.
if 2026 is when you'll need those special bins, what happens between November of this year and then? Are there going to be a lot of fines issued, right? Are they going to be enforcing this very
Yeah.
seriously? Because if they don't, then I can see people not buying the bins. They can say, listen, yeah, this is a new rule, but they're not enforcing it anyway, so who cares, right? If they are finding people, then maybe people will take it more seriously. But and we'll
Right.
see. We'll see what
Right.
the feedback is, right? And how the landlords,
Mhm.
small landlords here respond. So
Right.
I'll say this: when it comes to the different time for garbage pickup, I don't know if there's a whole lot of enforcement on it, but I'm just not seeing most landlords adhere to that around here. I'm seeing them
I
put out
can't see it
trash
working though. I
overnight.
can't see it working. I
What,
mean, maybe that's
no,
me,
I'm
but
saying what I'm saying what's going on currently, where they are saying that you're not supposed to leave the trash out overnight anymore because of the rats. They're saying that here's your scheduled time. You should put it out at a certain time for pickup. I'm still seeing landlords currently all around here in Howard Beach
Mhm.
leave the trash out
Mhm.
overnight the night before. It's just what they've always done. They haven't changed that habit at
Right.
all.
I think
Right.
that's an even bigger problem than the bins, I think, because
Mhm.
that leaves a target for the rats to go get. If it's left out all night, they're like, yeah, hey, buffet.
Sure, although to be fair, a lot of people leave the garbage out all the time, right? Like, let's say they've got a house with a fence, for example, or not even the fence, it could be
Mhm.
just outside the house, but a lot of times they'll leave their garbage bins outside the house, in front of their house, on
Mhm.
the side of the house, and they just push it to the curb on garbage day.
Right.
So it's not like it's
Right.
ever in the house, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So
So,
that's also something that needs to be looked at because people made fun of that. Oh, the rats are gonna, they're gonna look at a time schedule and then, they're gonna they can retime like because they were saying the difference doesn't
Mhm.
make still whether you put the garbage out at 6 o'clock p.m. or 10 o'clock the night before, whatever. You're just pushing it from the outside of the house to the curb. It's still outside. Like who cares when it's actually delivered to the curb? So
right.
yeah, I think that's a big part of this as well. If we really are serious about this, we won't be putting garbage outside at all until it's time for pickup, and it should
Right.
remain. I mean, even if it is going to be, I guess, outside your house, it should remain at all times in those sealed bins.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess that could potentially change as well. If everyone does get the sealed bins, then it shouldn't matter as much if they're leaving it outside their house, right? Because it's sealed anyway. So then it should be fine if the rats really can't detect it.
Right.
But who knows? I mean, the rats could be used to what they're used to too. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know rat behavior to be able to predict that. I mean, what if they're just used to coming out and going to a certain place for trash? They may still recognize that as a trash bin, although they're saying that these can't be penetrated. So at a certain point, will they get discouraged and stop trying, or are they still going to be hanging around where the garbage bins are?
They'll go to where they can get food.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess they'll change their behavior over time too.
Yeah. Maybe they'll get bold. Maybe this will make them bolder, and they'll start going into houses and restaurants more.
Or maybe they'll grow sharper teeth to break bins.
It would take a lot to chew through these. All right.
All right. Well, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, speaking of polls, we have a poll for this week, and it's going to be about the Equal Rights Amendment in New York. There's a federal version of this, right, that talks about no discrimination on account of gender or sex. I think it's phrased, because this has been circulating for a while now. We talked about many different states ratifying it, and then there are sunset provisions, and there's debate as to whether it needs to be repassed, re-ratified, all these different things. So there's a large-scale effort going on at the federal level about the Equal Rights Amendment. It's been happening for decades, right? But now we're talking specifically in New York, an amendment not to the federal Constitution, but to the New York Constitution. And that's going to be on the ballot in November. A court today decided that it is on the ballot. There were legal challenges that happened, as you know, was always the case. It has resulted now in this amendment proceeding to the ballot in November. And what it does is it stands to amend the New York State Constitution to add other categories of discrimination to make them illegal as well, right? Because people talk about, oh, such and such is discrimination, right? But what does that mean, right? There's discrimination all the time legally in certain forms. For example, if you set your price that, to an item that you're selling high, technically you're discriminating against people who can't afford that item, right? Who don't make enough money to buy that item. I mean, everything is some kind of discrimination, but the law is interested in what's lawful discrimination and what isn't, right? So usually when we talk about discrimination, we talk about in the law very specifically defined areas, racial discrimination being a big one, right? We talk about sex-based discrimination, although that is not as clear cut, right? There are different levels of scrutiny that these laws are subjected to. We know that race-based discrimination is always gets the highest level of scrutiny, meaning it's presumptively unlawful to do that, but you need a very compelling reason. When it comes to sex-based discrimination, usually it's a step below that. They call that intermediate scrutiny. Well, here in this case, they're trying to expand the categories of discrimination that would be unlawful. In other words, that would be subjected to that highest level of scrutiny. That would always be presumptively illegal to do. It is pretty expansive, and that's what I wanted to talk about, whether we think all these categories should be in there or not. Now, a lot of this is in response to what's happening, of course, in the country, and specifically what's going on with the Supreme Court, right? So we saw a lot of protections being scaled back by the Supreme Court. The state is responding with this effort to codify these protections into our law to make sure that even if the Supreme Court says states are allowed to, or even private business in some cases are allowed to discriminate, the state to combat that by saying, not in New York, you're not going to do that. So to outline this, the current bans on discrimination in New York, right, by the New York State Constitution are race, color, creed, and religion. All right. The proposed amendment that we're voting on in November would add to that ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy, pregnancy outcomes, reproductive health care, and autonomy. So what are our thoughts on this? Sheba, I know that your group has discussed this, right? The League of Women Voters.
Yes, we have. And
What are
we
pregnancy
are,
outcomes?
pregnancy, I guess, I didn't look the pregnancy outcomes and reproductive. If a woman decides, let me see what that is. If she decides that she wants an abortion,
Right.
she's not penalized.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying
You can't
abortion, it's
discriminate
pregnancy.
on the basis of the outcome of the pregnancy.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, and the reason why it's because why this happened and why they expanded it, because we know the Supreme Court ruled last year in June. I know they did Roe versus Wade. That was the first ruling with the Supreme Court, and they scaled down or abolished Roe versus Wade, and then that led into affirmative action, which they have done. They scaled down DEI.
Mm.
So, in order for people to be protected in New York, they expanded.
Right.
Which is good, because they also attacked Planned Parenthood. That was under attack heavy, because what I didn't like and what the misconception was when it came to women being pregnant or becoming pregnant, they always said, "Oh, when you go to Planned Parenthood, you go there to get an abortion," and that was not true. Planned Parenthood provides health care for women that are college women that do not have insurance. And I think
they did a study that said that most of the work that they do is actually outside the realm of reproductive rights, right?
Right.
So, and you mentioned Roe v. Wade overturned. We know that decision essentially kicked the law back to the states, right? And so this is the state of New York's attempt to say, all right, you can get back to us, but we're making sure that we have strong protections in our law.
Right, because what happens is that when that Roe versus Wade, some states, if a woman is, if a woman's pregnancy is threatens her health, or you can't get the abortion. You can't have the abortion. So some states followed that, went according to the guideline.
You mean
instituted that once
well, hold on a second. The decision didn't mandate that, right? But you're saying that it opened the door for states
right, it did.
to restrict the right.
Once that decision,
get very crazy in some cases with it.
Yeah, because it's just like with the DEI. Once that affirmative action ruling was handed down by the Supreme Court, it started a domino effect on certain issues within the states. So the states are like, well, we're doing away with all the DEI programs.
Yeah.
So
this is interesting from a legal point of view, because this would not only apply to local governments and the state government itself, but it would apply to any person, business, or organization, right? So we know the basic legal framework here is the Constitution sets rights that generally apply against the government, but we know that businesses, for example, cannot discriminate on a basis of race. That's not a constitutional right. That comes from the Civil Rights Act, right? So that's a law that was made. And it was justified via the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. So they found, even at the federal level, they found constitutional rationale, justification for it. But we have now this framework of laws that protects against discrimination, both at the private level and at the public level, governmental level, as it relates to race, right? Certain other narrow factors. This would, in New York, greatly expand that to include a lot of factors, although some of the factors, for example, ethnicity, national origin, those are already protected by civil rights laws. Even ethnicity, I don't know if that needs to be codified. I mean, it's good to do, but I also believe that would already be protected under our current interpretation of the law. But it's good to put it in there to remove any ambiguity, right? Ethnicity, national
Right,
origin. Then you can start getting into other things that
right.
may be new, because again, we have different levels, right? The equal protection clause of the Constitution, for example, has been interpreted, at least, to include different levels of protection depending on the class that you're discriminating against, right? So if it is based on race, it
Mhm.
gets that strict scrutiny. But currently, if it was based on age, for example, it would only be subjected to a rational basis review, which is very deferential. That's, basically the opposite of what race-based
Mhm.
discrimination would be, right?
Mhm.
That's a high standard for the government to meet, or for someone who's trying to overcome a challenge to meet. It's presumptively against them. When it comes to something like age, currently, it's presumptively in their favor, right? They have a lot of deference to do it. They would only need to show that it was rationally related to a legitimate interest. So this would obviously turn that on its head and say basically all of these types of discrimination would be presumptively illegal, right? So do we think that that goes too far, or is that appropriate?
I think it's appropriate considering what I've seen happen, and especially like with the reproductive health. Women can get birth control. They can talk about how they want to, how far, many years or how long I want it be in my marriage before I have a child.
Mhm.
So that's important.
Oh, yes.
Everybody,
So,
not,
so what you're saying? Who's going to tell you how long you can be in your
no,
marriage
but
with
see,
your child?
when you go to Planned Parenthood,
Huh?
you get to have reproductive health counseling.
Okay.
They will talk. You will talk. I'm not ready to have a child right now. Maybe so many years down the road, or maybe a year from now, I want to make sure that I can afford to have this child. So they give you guidance on that reproductive health. You
Oh,
understand what I'm
okay.
saying?
Okay. So you're saying it's important to protect that.
Family planning. Let's say it. Family
Right.
planning. That's what
Right.
it is. So you have a right to have family planning.
Do you think though that New York was ever really in danger of outlawing abortion?
I never thought about it, but I think with the climate of the being so aggressive against Planned Parenthood, I think it might have borderline on that.
Right. Right. And I guess it also would depend on who was in control of the legislature at the time, right? Who was the governor at the time.
Mhm.
These things
Right.
could be overturned if it's just a matter of law, and that's why I guess it's important to make the
Mhm.
distinction between an amendment to the Constitution and simple legislation, right? Because if it's a matter of law,
Mhm.
sure, you can pass a law or you can have what laws you want now. Another administration can come in, another governor, maybe the
Right.
House, the Assembly or the Senate flips or whatever. They can just start undoing laws or passing new laws to override the existing laws. So that can go back
Mhm.
and forth. Or, what I mean? If you have protections now, maybe you can lose it next year. But when it comes
Right.
to an amendment, that needs to be passed by the people of the state. That's why we're voting in November on that. And that's harder to overturn, right? Because it isn't just a
Mhm.
matter of new legislators coming in or a new governor coming in. It's a matter now of the people's will. The people aren't just voting on the elected officials. In this case, they're voting directly on the law. And so by having them voted into law, then it's not something that can simply be overturned by a simple act of the legislature later.
Right. And the question of whether it's, it's too far on some of the things, I guess it depends. Some of it might depend on how it's being applied. And
Mhm.
for example, what was I think one of the end stuff. A lot of it I think is coming out of the current talk, right? Gender stuff,
Yeah, gender
of course,
expression is
the
one of
gender
them.
expression,
Mhm.
like that type of thing, and how that discrimination is applied. But at the same time, we don't know how some might take it, so it's probably better to have protections in place.
Right. But you do have
Mhm.
to, I guess, question these things. I mean, even
Right,
from the perspective of legislating, right? Because now we're basically asking the people to legislate on this, right? And so
right,
you have to ask yourself, how is this going to be interpreted? How might it be interpreted? How might it be misused? How might it be misapplied?
Right.
What are the pitfalls, right? How are people going to take this? So we start, for example, combining age and gender expression, right? Does that mean that children cannot be denied their right to have gender affirming surgery, let's say? Is that something that we want to put into law, put into an amendment to the Constitution? I don't know, but is that a side effect of this? Could that be how this ends up being interpreted?
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
about,
I think that's an
there's a lot of
important.
controversy. And again, we can have discussions as to which side we're on politically or whatever, but there's a lot of discussion about sports, right?
Uh-huh.
Sports,
Yeah,
bathrooms, that
yeah,
whole
all
thing.
that, all
Uh-huh.
that stuff. So when you say gender expression cannot be subject to discrimination, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that, for example, someone can go to whichever prison he or she wants by saying
Right.
it's gender expression?
Uh-huh.
Right. You know, same with, sports teams in
Yeah.
school. Like, does that mean they can pick and choose? Yeah, I think there probably would, I think it's still kind of a new, even though it's been the conversation for the last several years, I think we're not really there as far as how to navigate those waters yet. It's still kind of being felt out. You know
Uh,
what I mean?
Mhm.
Because even there are people who are for all of it with no restrictions, and there are people who are
uh-huh.
opposing all of it, and people in the middle that just might not be understanding of any of it.
Right.
Um, so yeah,
And
you know,
here's why I'm just thinking, in my head, you mentioned bathrooms. What if it's simply a matter of having different bathrooms? Not even talking about who can use what bathroom anymore. We're talking about when you go to a restaurant, for example, they've got a men's
Uh-huh.
room and a ladies' room. Is it possible someone challenges that and says, well, you can't
yeah,
discriminate on the basis of gender expression or gender anymore? And so it's illegal to have separate bathrooms. You cannot have a men's room and a ladies' room anymore. I could see that being a challenge.
right.
Yeah.
I for one don't want that to happen. I prefer, and I say it this way because I've seen the line at women's bathrooms. I don't want that problem for men.
Yeah.
That's y'all's thing. We get in, we get out. I don't want that. You routinely would go
Uh-huh.
somewhere and the line for the women's bathroom is
It's
crazy, and men would
true.
just walk in and just walk
Yeah.
out.
Right.
And if we just
But see,
eliminate gendered
but you know,
bathrooms, then you're gonna have
Here's,
double lines.
yeah. And,
Yeah,
and here's the thing, that there was, just people might think that that sounds outlandish, but there was a case in election law a few years ago where, you have male and female county committee members, right? It's designated by the party. This is a male seat and a female seat. You
right. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah,
Right. You
uh-huh.
had a lawyer who went and found people who didn't identify as male or female, like they were
right,
Uh-huh.
non-binary, or they said they were they for whatever reason, however they classified themselves, they said they didn't fall into male or female, and they
right.
said, well, then therefore there's no seat that they can run for, because there's a male seat and a female seat, it leaves them out. So I can certainly see if this became an amendment in New York, a similar kind of lawsuit with people who said they don't identify as male or female, and so therefore there's no bathroom that they can use, and you're violating their right to gender expression.
Well, I think even that though is confusing, and part of how this specific conversation is confusing because we're talking
Uh-huh.
about gendered expression versus biological sex, though. Male and female wouldn't be gender expression. That would be biological sex.
All
That
right.
man and woman would be gender expression. And so that would be a
Uh-huh.
different thing.
Oh, but
But
the bathroom doesn't necessarily say male or female. It's the men's room and the ladies' room, and
that
I
would
think
be gender
that's
expression.
looked at. That's what I'm saying. I think that's looked at more
Uh-huh.
in terms of gender, and I think
Right.
people who identify as women generally want to be in the women's room.
Uh-huh.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm saying that's do that, but don't come into the men's room because I don't want that line.
That's what I'm saying. But with this amendment, I think it does open the door to these types of challenges for them to say there can be no men's room anymore.
Right. Well,
But
and here's the thing in that type of situation, right? I would say it's a possibility. You could, since it's gendered expression, you could just change it and say it's not a men's and women's room. It's a male and female room. Now we're talking about sex. It's not covered under gender expression.
Well, first of all, sex would be included in this as well, so
Mhm.
it would add that to it. But then you just have to start getting into the reasoning for it. This is why I say these things aren't always black and white, right? It's
Right. They're not.
And I think
it
what
creates this
this is
framework, and then you have
saying
to argue in court as to whether you can overcome what the law is, because the law is not absolute. But with that
Right.
being said, I can still see an argument that you're discriminating on the basis of gender identity and gender expression by having bathrooms that are designated for sex only, because it's saying that, well, you're doing that
Mhm.
to harm me, right? You're purposely excluding me. You're trying to discriminate against me effectively
well,
by
Mike, there
forcing me
are
into a
some,
bathroom I don't want to be into.
but then there are some organizations or companies that that did gender neutral bathrooms.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And
They
also, we
they,
should
they
say
have
there's a law
gender
in New
neutral.
York. There's currently a law in New York. I believe it's a city law, not a state law, where if you have a single occupancy bathroom, it has to be gender neutral.
I think it's wow, there's a law for that. I mean, like I
Uh-huh.
would think that wouldn't need a law
Well, you
because
can't have, for example, let's say you're a restaurant and you've got two or three, but let's say you have two, you've got two small bathrooms, right? You can't say this one is for men and this one is for women. It's got to be,
Mhm.
everyone can use either one.
ah,
Right.
got you. It's
Mhm.
funny, like this idea of these gender neutral bathrooms. I actually have used one years ago, before any of this talk was going on. There was a nightclub that I went to, and which is probably the worst place to have a gender neutral bathroom, but they had one, and so it was like a hole in the wall type of club, and the bathroom was filled with men and women
Mhm.
in there in the same space. I mean, urinals were just open, dudes was using the urinals, and there's women in the mirror, and
Right.
probably not the best place to have it, but uh,
Mhm.
At the
it
same
it
time, though, on this trajectory, doesn't it kind of seem like that's what's going to have to happen over the next 20 to 25 years?
I don't think so. I think there is a possibility for a compromise. First of all, I think this is I, I don't know how long this is going to last.
Right. Well, that's why I
I-
said on this trajectory. I mean, the
Right. But
climate
I
can
Mhm.
think
change.
I think the difference would be, instead of having it open, maybe a bathroom that might have um if you have a combined bathroom where each stall, there's no urinals on the side, each stall has, I mean, each place has stalls that just people can go in and close the door, privacy. And then like the sink area is just an open shared space.
Mhm.
So that could be a possibility. But
Right.
again, we'll see how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And see, I'm just, as an attorney, right, as someone who has worked in the legislature, drafting legislation, negotiating legislation, I look at these bills and I understand, or in this case, a proposed amendment, I understand the purpose behind it, right? And I even agree with almost everything it's trying to accomplish. But
Mm.
maybe I'm scrutinizing it more carefully because of my professional background. I'm starting to think about, what are the pitfalls? What are the downsides to this? How might this be tested? What are the unintended consequences of this, right?
Right.
I think that needs to be thought
Mhm.
through.
No, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that's a good point. The unintended consequences definitely need to
Right.
be looked at.
Right.
In any of these situations and proposals, how might it go? How might it go really right? How might it go really wrong?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it
Like
comes
we were
to,
talking about age
yeah, I
before.
was
Yeah.
exactly age discrimination, right? So that's a good
Mhm.
segue into that. Of course, broadly speaking, I think most people would agree we want to bar discrimination on a base of age, right? People are against
Yeah.
the idea of ageism, but what does that end up meaning in practice? For example, are there certain jobs that you don't want someone too young or you don't want someone too old? And
Mhm.
again, the law is never absolute, so there may be exceptions, right? There may be cases where even though age discrimination is prohibited, there are compelling reasons maybe to overcome it in certain narrow circumstances. So it could be one of those type of things. But are we going to end up with unintended consequences when it comes to prohibiting all discrimination broadly speaking, at least on the basis of age.
I think if we're talking, it depends on where we're at. If we're talking about like jobs, for example, right?
Yeah.
You could saying, maybe there's a certain age you don't want people doing certain things. If the discrimination is based off is saying we can't based off age, then you're going to look at qualifications. You're going to look at experience. You're going to look at skills.
But
Mhm.
experience and age sometimes are hand in hand. I know that they're not inherently. You could have
Right.
someone younger who's a lot more experienced or what have you. But if you're looking at experience, I mean, then it's easy to say, well, we don't want the person who has too much experience in a job because they're overqualified, or we only want someone with a ton of experience. So you may still be getting at age without saying it's about age.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And I think
true.
that's what they do now.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
And that I think that's even one of the reasons why some people recommend taking the dates
right,
off of your
Yeah,
resume,
right,
definitely.
especially
Yeah.
education, because people will look at that and be like,
Uh-huh.
oh, well, we can estimate what their age is.
Yeah,
In
that's true.
Japan, in Japan, ageism is quite common.
hmm
There'll be even jobs, I've seen job postings that say no one over the age of 25 or just right out blatant. We don't want anyone over 30 or something like that. So
Mhm.
it's quite crazy.
right. I mean, and it's so easy, just like
But
we
they
said.
do it here.
Let's
They
say
do
they
it here.
wanted, hold on, just for as an example, let's say they wanted to ensure they got someone over 30, but they didn't want to say that. They can say you must have a minimum of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years of experience, right?
Right. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
but they do it here. They do it in here as well in job descriptions. But you have to look at the wording.
hmm
They
Sure,
do it through
sure.
the wording here,
Yeah.
so they're not as open as it would be in Japan. But they do. It is still the same thing.
Sure. Sure, sure. No, it's definitely true.
Right, right. I'm just wondering when it comes to age discrimination, it's funny because it almost seems like there's a contradiction in thought on this. Because on the one hand, everyone says ageism is wrong. Then on the other hand, you're seeing people say these people are too old to run for president. Or the one
Yeah,
thing I hear all the time is, you know what we should do? When people get to a certain age, they should have to retake their driver's test, or they should have limited driving privileges, right? People over
Right.
80 shouldn't be able to drive anymore, not at night. Well, if you have this as an amendment, no age-based discrimination, would you not be able to do that? Maybe not.
Well, let me ask you though. I
uh-huh.
guess I mean this is not national level, but I
Yeah,
mean one of the biggest age discriminators, so to speak, in states is that you have to be 35 to run for president.
that's in the federal constitution, though.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah,
not a federal thing, but like it's one of the biggest things there. And I guess the idea here was you need to have some sort of
right,
experience. You need to have
Right,
sort of understanding and this type of
right.
thing.
right.
So,
Because they do that with police officers as well, state troopers.
Sure, oh,
There's a
yeah.
sure.
certain age,
Military.
they
Yeah,
between yeah, they do
yeah.
that.
Military. You can't join the military if you're over what I think it used to be lower, but since the war in Iraq, they increased it. Now it's around early 40s or late 30s is the cutoff date. You can't join the military. So,
Right. Now, listen, I mean, I think one of the classic examples we've always talked about when it comes to businesses discriminating on the basis of sex is ladies free before midnight, right? And it's almost like a joke because I think people,
Uh-huh.
men usually want more ladies in the club and that kind of stuff, but sometimes they're like, hey, isn't that discrimination, right? Um,
right.
and I think that goes back to my point of none of this is going to be absolute, although I think if you make it an amendment, it does elevate the scrutiny. So it kind of subjects all of this type of stuff to more of that side eye, right? Like that, we
Mhm.
shouldn't be doing this. So it doesn't make it absolute, but it does make a lot of this, I think, harder for businesses and potentially the government to get away with. And so,
Right. Right.
would we lose a lot of what we currently have? And maybe that's a good thing. I mean, maybe clubs shouldn't be saying no ladies before midnight, but
Right.
I just think
Oh
that
yeah,
with this, you could expect a lot of these things that I think we maybe take for granted in our society to be challenged.
Right. I mean,
Mm.
maybe you can get in free at the club now. Just be like, look, if you don't let me in free, I'm going to sue you for discrimination.
Yeah.
What? Based on what?
But if it says ladies free before midnight and you're a
Oh, I
dude, we
see what you
won't let
mean.
you in
Yeah.
And then
free.
you say my gender expression allows me in.
Yeah, my age, my gender, well, not my age, my gender
Mhm.
expression. Yeah. So, I mean, they have other ones, right? The grown and sexy nights where you have to be 25 plus to get in, you
Oh,
know.
okay. I thought you were going for the sexy part. I was like,
But
well, this
both.
doesn't add attractiveness to this.
Oh.
It doesn't say you can't discriminate
Yeah.
against ugly people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a contentious one. Like who decides?
Right, right. So
Yeah.
I'll be honest, of all of these, I think most undecided, I guess I would say, on the age one, right? Because I agree we want to combat ageism and age discrimination generally. But I'm just wondering if there are instances where we actually want to allow qualifications or criteria based on age. And this would actually be shooting ourselves in the foot by not allowing these classifications anymore.
But don't we do that in some degree though? Like,
Mhm.
are you allowed to work at a bar if you're 18? Where place that serves alcohol?
But that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Someone could come in and say, well, now that you put this in the state constitution, you can no
Right,
longer deny me that.
right,
And again, I don't want to make it sound like it's going to be absolute 100% because they can still
right, right,
come in and say that there are compelling reasons to
right,
still prevent that, right? Because it's still
But
illegal trading and that
yeah,
kind of thing when you're young.
right, right,
I,
right.
I understand I understand what you're saying, Mike, but then you have to still consider the DEI in all of this
Mhm.
because it also mentions disability.
Right. But see,
And I
disability
think
is
what
also
they're
a very
trying to
vague
do
word,
is
right?
like,
Hold on
Right.
a second, just on that. That's not necessarily a physical disability. That could be a mental disability or maybe even an emotional disability. But that the definition of what's disabled can change year to year also.
Right.
right, but I don't think it's talking about that level of disability because that's the
Doesn't
mental health
specify.
or
Doesn't
because
say physical. It just says disability, I believe.
right. But I think in that case, they're talking about people that may be hearing impaired.
Not just
Uh,
that though.
But
I
if they
think
don't specifically
right. They
say
don't
that,
specify. So that
then it
might be
could
right,
the
be open.
intention. But when it just says disability, that's a blanket, right? So that's a very vague word. That could mean almost anything.
right. But this is the protections. Now, what are those? What do those protections consist of? Like disability, like I said, a person that's hearing impaired. They may be not, legally blind.
But also someone who's
So
depressed may be considered disabled.
Right.
depression considered a disability.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that it was under another category,
But
but
if
maybe
it's
not.
so crippling, it's crippling depression and you're disabled by
Right. And see, if it's not
it.
specified,
Yeah.
like the unintended consequences is like, for example, a person that is blind saying it's discrimination that I can't be a beat cop on the police force
Or an airplane pilot or something.
or an airplane pilot or
Right.
something
No,
like
I
that.
don't think
Yeah.
it's saying
Or
it or
even we
taking
just,
it
by the
to.
way, we just talked about bartending. What if kids want to say, wait a minute, you can't tell me I can't drink under 21? That's age discrimination.
No, no, I think that no, that's I think that's a bit too far.
I agree. No,
That's
I
the
agree.
point.
I
That's
But
the point.
understand what you're
but
saying,
I agree
but
though
I'm
that
saying
that's
is
when it
that
would have to be balanced against that compelling interest, right? Is the law narrowly tailored to meet that compelling interest? In other words, does the government have a damn good reason to do it? So it would still be
Right.
tested, and I think it will be harder to get away with all of this kind of stuff now, which maybe is good on balance. But then there are these areas where it can be challenged and maybe lead to these results we
and,
don't want.
and then these other areas may be covered. You don't, you have to see what the proposed amendment is in detail.
Well, we are
We
looking at it
just
now.
see
Right.
We are looking at it,
Well,
and it's
but
that's
not.
the
that's
point of being specific in the language, right?
Yeah,
Because it
yeah.
have
right,
these unintended consequences, or even thinking about what could possibly be these
Right,
unintended
right.
consequences.
And by the way, I do agree that if a kid, or I guess it really would be a parent for some reason bringing suit on behalf of the kid to say that the kid should be able to drink because it's age discrimination to say that they can't, I agree that they would probably lose that lawsuit. And it would end up
Right.
being,
right,
yes,
because
you
the
do
law
have
says
this amendment, but the government has a compelling interest in ensuring that the kid isn't drinking under 21. I do think that that was
Right.
still told, but I do think there are areas, you know, and that's kind of like an extreme example. I think there are some areas where things could fall that we might not want to fall.
Right, right. Yeah. And we have to think about those things when you bring forth this type of proposal.
Yeah.
You have to think about these possibilities. Because we can rationalize what we mean. Oh, it doesn't mean that. We don't think it means that, or it shouldn't mean that. But
Right.
someone else is going to interpret it differently based on whatever their agenda is or their
Right.
ideology.
Right. And the job of the courts isn't to look at it and think about what's socially acceptable or
Right.
what the pleasant way to interpret this, right? What would make sense from a societal or cultural standpoint. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to interpret the law as it's written and figure out if there is a compelling interest, right? If, for example, strict scrutiny is met. Strict scrutiny, legally speaking, is a tough bar to meet. And so that would mean that any type of discrimination that falls under these categories would default to not being allowed.
Right, but still there's a law in New York where parents are protected. And when you look at the age, in 18, you're legal to do what you want in New York. When you're in the New York State, when
Not to drink.
say, right, but when yeah, probably not to drink, but it's legal to do some things in New York once you turn 18.
Sure.
Right.
17 as well.
I'm sorry.
17 as well for certain things.
Oh, but I think with this, with the age and the age that you're talking, the disability, I think there's still guidelines. There's still laws that that are in place that protect this amendment to some degree.
Well, if there are still laws that protect against some of this discrimination already, to what extent is the amendment necessary?
Well, because I may look at you and say, "Oh, I don't want to hire him because he, I can't." I look at you and your physical appearance may be something I don't like. I dealt with people like him before. I don't want him on the job because blah 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 blah.
Yeah, what's wrong with Scala,
So,
man? He looks
yeah.
normal. What's wrong?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I trust him. See what I'm saying?
So I'm confused as to what you're arguing here.
It's the beard. It's the beard. You can't trust a beard.
You know what's funny? People would always say that, and that's why you never saw people running for high office with beards until JD Vance just came on stage with the full beard at the convention.
Yeah.
Like,
right. See, that's what I'm saying. You had
maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's something to that idea.
De Blasio always had a beard, and he shaved it off when he ran for mayor.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think they're with this, even though they are have the proposed amendment, I think there are still laws that have protections in some of these.
That's my question, and we touched on it before. The amendment is more powerful than just a regular law, so that might be the reason you want to put it in an amendment to make it stronger, less easy to overturn. But if you're saying that all of the things already have protections, or some of them at least have protections in the law, then do you need the amendment, especially if the amendment is going to lead to potentially unintended consequences of going too far? Why do you need to take that extra step if you already have the protection?
Well, that's because there's no protection of the Supreme Court. That's what all this came out of. Let's not lose that.
The states is already given
right, but they fell back on the states when the Supreme Court Roe versus Wade, they put that back on the states. So the states are saying we've got to protect ourselves and our people, our constituents. The states have to do that now, even with affirmative action. The states have to protect themselves or protect the people in some way. So this is what all this has come. Has brought all of this out.
Right. Well, and that's a good point, because I think a while back I talked about how it annoys me when you see people on a debate stage talk about the state government is the people, right? They'll be like, they'll say the government is so evil, right? But they're talking about the federal government and Congress. And then they say, but these things shouldn't be regulated by the government. They should be regulated by the people. When they say the people, they mean state government. Well, those are still politicians. Those are still government, right? It's not like they act like state government is like this quaint, meeting of PTA moms or something like that, but it's not, right? These are actual politics, especially in a state like New York, right? These are big time politicians that are in these seats. So in this case, it's not leaving it to the legislators per se. It's actually leaving it to the people, because in November it'll be on the ballot, and all of the people of the state will get the chance to vote on it. So in that sense, it's a good thing, right? When they say it shouldn't be up to the government, it should be up to the people. Well, now it really is up to the people.
Right. Well, we should put this
That's
into
the
the
people.
poll.
Yeah, let's see. Speaking of the people, right? See what the people.
Yeah, not put this into the people.
All right. So the poll question of the week is, do you support expanding New York's equal rights guarantees to include age, gender expression, and pregnancy outcomes, amongst other things? We'll stick with those for the sake of the question.
Yeah, we'll see what people have to say about this here.
So we are coming up on time. We can touch on a couple of things briefly. One point I wanted to make on here, I was reading polls, and I'm not one person to say polls are wrong, never trust polls, never believe polls. I don't like when people say, look at 2016, they said that Hillary was going to win. You just don't know how to read the polls. Somebody said to me, or I think I overheard somebody say once, that the poll said Hillary was going to win by 90%. No poll said that. It maybe said that at one point she had a 90% chance of winning, but that still leaves a 10% chance of losing. And you got to look at the stats, and really know what you're talking about, and not to say nonsense like that. So the polls do have meaning, but they are also worth looking into and looking at the methodology used. No, they're not always perfect, and there always is a margin of error, and that's significant as well. Well, one of the things that I think we need to really keep an eye on here is, if you're following these recent polls, they're showing, I'm talking about presidential race now, they're showing Biden winning voters 65 and older, and Trump winning voters 35 and under. That doesn't really make sense. And especially when you look at the youth vote. In 2022, the last big national election, right, the midterm elections that we had, the Democrats won the youth vote by 30 points. So you're telling me that between 2022 and now, there's been a 30+ point shift, 30% has shifted to the Republicans. I'm just not buying that. Now, maybe there has been some shifting, and you can talk about various issues here, but I think a lot of this has to do with younger people not answering the phone. And maybe the people who are taking these polls are politically aligned more in a certain direction, but I don't think it's truly representative of the youth vote. If you look at how the youth has actually voted, even as recently as 2022, I'm just not buying a 30-point shift in one direction. That will be unprecedented, I would say, in the history of electoral politics. That's never been measured or seen ever before. So when you look at these polls being close, I think that you do have to take into account the fact that some of this is being measured inaccurately, it seems, right? Like if it's saying that there's been a 30-point shift in the kids, I don't think so. So if, for example, if a state has Trump up by +2, well, if you're telling me that within that poll, more kids are voting for Trump than Biden, then I don't think he's really up by 2. I think that there's a flaw in the way that this poll is being conducted in terms of the representation. The other thing I'll mention on that is, most of these polls I'm seeing now, especially the ones that have Trump leading in these states, assume that Kennedy is on the ballot. Now, we know Kennedy is running as an independent, a third-party candidate, and he's actually still petitioning in many states to make the ballot. So we don't know. Nobody knows if he'll be on the ballot in those states. We've seen him fumble the ball and not make the ballot in some states already that he tried to. So if you look at a poll, for example, in Michigan, I believe Michigan is one of the states where he's currently trying to get on the ballot. It shows it being very close. And sometimes you'll see Trump up by a few points with Kennedy there. You take Kennedy off and you find that Biden actually is ahead. So this current state of the race is going to depend on whether Kennedy is on the ballot in these states and how many states is on the ballot. And that's unknown. And so I say all this to say, no, it doesn't show one candidate decisively leading over the other. I'm not saying that means Biden is winning or Trump is losing or anything. What I'm saying is that people are so fed up. Maybe they're nervous, but they're looking at these polls as if they're gospel and they tell you what's going on in the race, when what they really show is that, number one, it's a toss-up. It's all within the margin of error. And number two, the dust hasn't truly settled. We haven't had the conventions yet. We're not yet at the point where we have the stabilization that would be required. We don't even know who's on the ballot yet, right? We're not stable enough to know exactly what is what, right? What the real picture is. And so all you can really read from it now is it's just too close and too early to know what the hell's going on.
True,
Mhm.
true. I'd say the fact that it is too close does indicate um, which way things might be. It shouldn't be this close. There is a
Oh,
very clear
Yeah.
difference. There should not be, Trump should be nowhere near this close.
I
After
hear you.
everything,
Right.
after everything that he's done, that we've known about him, the court cases, the criminal activities, all of that stuff, things he said and done, he shouldn't be anywhere near that. And so the fact that that it is a close race does say a lot.
It does. Absolutely. It does.
Mhm.
But people are also saying that this campaign is over. The polls show that Biden can't win. Like, what are you talking about? First of all, the polls show it's within the margin of error. It's a toss up. And again, of all the things that I mentioned, the polls actually show Biden probably has the edge. But again, just, I'm not going to bet on that right now. What I'm saying is
Right.
that it's ridiculous to say that the polls show that Trump already won. That's certainly not what they show. They're showing the opposite of that. And also, I looked at the polls in 2012. Incumbent presidents often suffer, right? They often are looked at in a negative light. Now, you can say Biden's approval ratings are lower than Obama's were and so forth, but Romney was beating Obama in the polls even through October of 2012,
Mhm.
even the month of that election, right? I saw a poll, I think it was from the middle of October, that had Romney at 50%, Obama at 46%. So were people saying there that Obama should drop out? The polls show that he's got no chance, he's done. I mean, maybe some people were, because I think there was a
Well,
Time magazine article saying at one point that Obama had an 11% chance of re-election and he was doomed, and we know that that didn't happen. So I guess maybe some people were, but I don't think the calls were as strong in that case. And I don't know, maybe
but doesn't it say?
the times are different. People are freaking out more, maybe with good reason.
Mhm.
But I think we also need
Yeah.
some historical perspective here and not act like the numbers show that this is a lost cause. Go ahead,
You gonna say
Sheila.
something, Shiva?
I was gonna say, but isn't that is that margin of error? Don't they say the polls
Right.
with the margin? Isn't
Absolutely
that, is
right. So
that
that's what I'm
kind of
saying. So,
is that
for
a
example, if a
disclaimer? But what
yes,
I'm asking is that a disclaimer under? Is that a disclaimer? The
that's how
margin of
stats
error,
work. That's how stats work. Because what happens is when you
It
take a
can't be perfect.
right, when you take a
right?
poll, some people say this too, right? Even I think when I was a kid, I didn't understand stats, right? So when they said they took
Uh-huh.
a poll and they said such and such is winning the race, right?
Uh-huh.
You're a kid, you're watching Clinton versus Bush, let's say, and they say, oh, Clinton is up by 2 points. And they're like, well, they never asked me. They never asked my family. How do we know? We didn't all vote yet. How do we know? And then you look at the sample size. They only asked 500 people. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. I'm gonna burn this up right now. This is propaganda. This is nonsense. 500 people when there are millions of people who have to vote. It makes no sense, right? That's your reaction as a kid or as someone who doesn't understand how stats work. But then when you
Uh-huh.
look at it, you realize you actually don't need a very big sample size to get a pretty accurate picture of how a
Right.
population is thinking. With that said, it's not going to be perfect. And that's why you have the margin of error, because if you're only asking a few hundred people, thousand, maybe even a couple
Uh-huh.
thousand people, but you're trying to read into it what millions of people are going to say, you have to look at your methodology and see how close it's going to be. How can you really extrapolate that? And it's going to come
Uh-huh.
inherently with a certain margin, like, maybe plus or minus 5%, let's say. That means that
Uh-huh.
if, right, let's say you have a candidate up by 2, they might be really winning by 2, but if it's plus or minus 5, they could be up by as much as 7, or maybe they could be losing by 3, right? So
Uh-huh.
that's what that indicates, that there's a range, right? And then what you can do is you can start averaging together polls, but there are methods to doing that accurately as well. But let's say you can, all things being equal, take multiple polls that have larger margins of error, let's say you've got a few different polls that have a plus or minus 3, you can sometimes put those together to get it more like plus or minus 1, right? Because now you have a bigger sample size. But again, going back to my original point, you have to make sure not just that you have enough people in it, but that the population that you're using is truly representative of the population that's voting. That's really the hardest part to do. And, there's a whole science that goes into that to try to predict what it's going to be. It's never going to be perfect. But for example, if you're coming out with young people voting all Republican, well, that kind of raises a red flag, and maybe you're not sampling them accurately.
Right. Or if you're looking at it, methodology is important. Like you touched on it earlier. Like if you're doing a phone poll, for example, you're going to get certain results because young people don't answer their phones anymore. I think there's even articles about this.
Right. Now,
and so if you're looking at that,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, if you're looking at that, then you got to think the respondents are going to be people of a certain generation that are going to be giving you the answers, and you're missing a whole demographic.
It seems maybe in this case, for some reason, the ones who still do answer their phone are more conservative, maybe because they're more like their parents. Kids who answer their phone, maybe old souls. I don't know. But what I was going to say is, to be fair, pollsters are attempting to work this into the polls, right? So it's not like they're just taking a shot in the dark and then, oops, I guess we didn't get enough young people. No, it's like they're trying to figure out, how to compensate for this, right? So, for example, if they can try to figure out the voting population is going to be this much Democrat, this much Republican, they're going to try to poll that percentage of Democrats and Republicans. Same for age, right? So if they think a certain number of young people are going to come out, then they should try to get approximately that many young people by percentage in there. But again, maybe they're getting the wrong types of young people in there now, right? There are certain things that maybe, and that can account for the margin of error, but that can also make the margin of error wrong. I mean, they could also be overestimating the quality of some of these polls.
Right.
So I think we will have a better idea regarding the numbers after the conventions and after the ballots are finalized, right? Because it's kind of silly now to ask people, who would you vote for between Biden, Trump, and Kennedy? And then Kennedy doesn't even make the ballot in your state. Well, then those numbers don't mean anything. So you have to see. And it's funny because some people were speculating that Kennedy was going to hurt Trump. I think early on the data had showed that because of his anti-vaccine type stances or whatever, that he was pulling more from the conservative base or the more populist voters. But it seems on balance now that Kennedy hurts Biden more than he hurts Trump. And so you're looking at polls, one-on-one Biden and Trump, Biden is doing better. But when you throw Kennedy in the mix, that's where you're seeing Trump leading by a few points in some of these states. Again, Kennedy may not even make the ballot in those states. And so you do need to keep an eye on what happens there.
All right.
So
I think we've definitely pushed the time here.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the last conversation was kind of a bottom line here, just understanding that these poll numbers may not be completely accurate, and things haven't completely settled or in place. We still kind of have to wait and see what's going on. It doesn't give anybody a reason to pull back on their efforts and just keep pushing towards the outcome that you're looking for.
Right. I would say quite the contrary of pushing back, pulling back on your efforts, right? What it does show is that this is up in the air, and it's a fight, but it should be a fight won at the battle box, right? We talked about that also. Tempering the rhetoric, right? We call this nuance because we like to look at these issues from all sides and have a nuanced, reasoned conversation. And I think that's the way to go, as opposed to continuing to increase the heat, because we see that leads to tragic outcomes that we all want to avoid.
Right.
So, all right. Well, it sounds like that we've done it. We've done the bottom line. We've had our discussions. Another great week of Nuance. So where can people find us?
YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere podcasts are available. Look for Nuance Show. Short, simple, and to the point.
That's it. I like it. I love checking out that channel, by the way. Check out the shorts. They're really entertaining, and the video clips that we post on YouTube. As always, we thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Sheba. We've got work to do. We'll catch you next time.